China just crossed a point of no return, one no civilization in history has ever reversed. For the first time in modern history, the world's most populous nation is shrinking, not in influence, but in people. The engine that powered its rise is running out of fuel. In 2022, China's population fell for the first time in more than 60 years. By 2100, forecasts say it could drop below 800 million, nearly half its size today. It's not just a demographic shift, it's a countdown, and the impact stretches far beyond China itself. When the country that drives nearly 1/5 of human productivity begins to contract, the world feels it through higher prices, weaker supply chains, and a quiet redrawing of power. This isn't only about charts or statistics, it's about destiny. And what happens when the nation that defined global growth begins fighting time itself? Because when China changes, the balance of the 21st century changes with it. How did one of history's greatest population booms turn into a demographic free fall? The answer begins and ends with one policy that broke the future. China's story has always been a cycle, a rhythm of growth, collapse, and recovery. Each wave of history built the next. For centuries, its strength lay in sheer numbers. At the height of the Qing dynasty, nearly 1 in 3 human beings lived within China's borders. That force of population powered everything: armies, commerce, and culture. Numbers were influence, but scale has a cost. Rebellions, famines, and colonial pressures in the 19th and early 20th centuries shattered that stability. By the time Mao Zedong declared the People's Republic in 1949, the country stood exhausted, yet eager to rebuild. The leadership reached a simple conclusion. If China was to be strong again, it needed people. Many people. More births, more power became the logic of recovery. And it worked. Through the 1950s and 60s, the nation experienced one of the largest population booms in recorded history. Families had 6, 7, even 8 children. But behind that success, the seeds of crisis were already taking root. Food shortages lingered, cities swelled faster than infrastructure could handle, and leaders feared a future they couldn't feed. On the surface, China looked unstoppable. Underneath, it was carrying too much weight. As history has shown again and again, behind every boom lies the shadow of a crash. By the 1970s, Beijing had done the math and didn't like what it saw. At current birth rates, the population could surpass 2 billion within decades. Officials warned that overpopulation could undo everything the revolution had achieved. The government needed control. And fast. The Later, Longer, Fewer campaign was the first attempt. Couples were urged to marry later, wait longer, and have fewer children. It worked, maybe too well. Within 10 years, the fertility rate halved. But leaders weren't satisfied. They wanted precision. So in 1980, the state launched one of the most ambitious social experiments in human history, the one-child policy. The new rule limited most urban families to a single child. Enforcement was harsh. Millions of sterilizations and terminations were carried out. Sons were favored, daughters quietly vanished. Moral debates aside, the numbers shifted exactly as planned. Births fell, the population stabilized, and China's economic miracle began. The factories filled, the economy opened, and by the 1990s, China had become the world's manufacturing core. Leaders celebrated. They believed they had found the perfect formula: limited people, unlimited growth. But while policy could cap births, it couldn't control the long arc of consequence. By the time Beijing loosened the restriction decades later, something irreversible had changed: people's desires. Urban life was expensive, education competitive, and raising even one child had become daunting. A nation built on control discovered the limits of control. Once people stopped choosing family, no law can make them start again. Today, the decline isn't theoretical, it's visible. You see it in shuttered schools, in aging communities, and in cities where apartment lights stay dark. The 4-2-1 generation, 4 grandparents, 2 parents, 1 child, now carries the weight of an entire demographic pyramid. Millions of only children are responsible for 6 elders, often with little support. Marriage and birth rates have plummeted. Gen Z describe family as a liability, not stability. Surveys show most young Chinese plan for 1 child or none. Online, the phrase tangping, or lying flat, has become a life philosophy, a quiet rebellion against endless pressure. Bailan, or let it rot, takes it further, rejecting the idea of chasing a future that no longer feels rewarding. This collapse isn't happening through crisis, but through choice. For the first time in history, prosperity itself is driving population decline. As education and income rise, fertility falls. Not out of poverty, but hesitation. The result? Empty streets, abandoned kindergartens, and an economy silently losing its lifeblood. China's rise was built on youth, but today that very foundation is turning grey. The country is aging faster than any major economy in history, and unlike the West or Japan, it's doing so before it reaches full wealth. For decades, mass urbanization disguised the problem. Rural migration flooded factories with eager workers, driving exports and cheap manufacturing. But that flow has slowed to a trickle. The labour force is shrinking, wages are climbing, and pension systems are overstretched. 1 in 4 citizens will be over 60 by 2035. By 2050, the median age will surpass that of the US and nearly match Japan's. Factories once filled with 20-year-olds now rely on middle-aged workers. Industries built on abundance are learning to live with scarcity. Japan managed its aging crisis from a position of affluence. China is heading there mid-stride with vast inequality and weaker social protection. It's a race between growth and gravity always wins eventually. The real shortage isn't in materials or resources, it's in time. For 40 years, Made in China meant speed and scale. It powered global trade and lifted hundreds of millions from poverty. But that dominance is fading. The average Chinese factory worker is now over 40. Labour costs have tripled since the early 2000s. Companies that once relied on endless manpower are leaving. To India, Vietnam, Indonesia, even Mexico. Apple now assembles iPhones in India. Nike stitches shoes in Vietnam. Even Chinese brands are moving production abroad to offset costs. The flow of industry that once moved into China is now flowing out. Automation helps. Robots never retire. But machines don't buy homes or start families. They can keep productivity high, but can't sustain demand. As labour costs climb, the world's supply chain is fragmenting. Manufacturing is decentralizing for the first time in generations. The ripple effects will reshape trade, prices, and politics across the globe. For a country that defined efficiency, this is an identity crisis. When a nation loses its workers, it loses one of its greatest sources of power: leverage. Inside Beijing's most guarded offices, one concern overshadows all others. The clock is ticking. China's leaders know that population isn't just a statistic, it's a form of strength. And each year that strength fades. The government's own projections show military-age citizens declining sharply by the 2030s, just as retirees soar. For a state pursuing ambitious goals, like eventual reunification with Taiwan, the shrinking manpower pool adds pressure. The People's Liberation Army's modernization goal, set for 2027, is no coincidence. Analysts call this period China's demographic window. Beyond it, sustaining long-term military or economic dominance gets harder every year. The logic is brutal but familiar. Act while strong, or risk losing the ability to act at all. Russia faced a similar dilemma after its own demographic peak, choosing aggression before decline solidified. History doesn't always repeat, but it does echo. Once human momentum is lost, no system can recreate it. Beneath the government's strategies lies a quieter tragedy: the unraveling of community. Entire towns are vanishing from the map. In some provinces, populations have dropped 15% in a decade. Streets that once overflowed with children now echo only with the sound of footsteps from the elderly. Cities, meanwhile, choke under financial pressure. Housing remains unaffordable, jobs uncertain, and social mobility fragile. The dream of stability, a house, a family, a future, feels unreachable for many. Online frustration spills into sarcasm. State ads encouraging childbirth are ridiculed. Incentive programs are dismissed as meaningless. People aren't rebelling with protests, they're rebelling with indifference. The original social contract, work hard, build the nation, achieve security, no longer rings true. And when belief collapses, policy can't repair it. A nation can rebuild infrastructure, but rebuilding optimism is far harder. Still, China is not standing still. Faced with decline, it's turning to reinvention. Automation is the first pillar. Billions are invested in AI, robotics, and high-tech industries. The goal: keep factories running even as workers vanish. Immigration is the second, something once unthinkable. Small pilot programs now welcome foreign experts to specific economic zones. It's a cautious experiment in diversity for a country historically closed to it. Narrative control is the third. State media now champions population quality over quantity, framing the future as one led by innovation, education, and technology rather than headcount. It's a bold strategy, but an uncertain one. Machines can't consume, and migrants arrive too slowly to change the math. Even with optimism, projections still show the population halving by century's end. So Beijing is betting everything on a second transformation, from quantity to capability, from labor to intelligence. If it succeeds, China could pioneer a new model of power. If it fails, it risks becoming the first modern empire to age itself into decline. No civilization falls overnight. It fades when it can no longer picture a tomorrow bigger than its past. China's decline won't come with an explosion. It's unfolding in slow motion, in empty classrooms, quiet homes, and ghost factories. The shift is already here. For decades, the country proved that population could equal power, that sheer numbers could build an empire. But now that same strength is dissolving. And no amount of policy, propaganda, or innovation can stop the clock completely. The age of endless expansion is ending. The next era will test whether a nation built on numbers can survive on knowledge. Because this story isn't only about China. Every advanced power, from the US to Europe to Japan, will soon face the same shrinking future. What happens when progress collides with population decline? History's survivors have one thing in common: adaptability. Whether China's next century is written as decline or transformation will depend on how quickly it learns to evolve. Because in the end, it isn't war or wealth that decides a nation's fate. It's birth, it's death, and what it chooses to do in between.